This year's theme for the Bishop's Annual Appeal is "The Sower Went Out to Sow." In Jesus' parable of the sower, some of the seeds fall on rocky ground. Some fall among weeds or thorns, and others find their way into soil that will hold them until water and sunlight call new sprouts out of the ground, eventually producing 30, 60, and 100-fold. In another of Jesus' parables, he tells of a farmer who sows seeds in the earth. He goes to bed each night, he gets up each morning, doesn't know how those seeds sprout or grow. But when the time for harvesting comes, he does his part and gets out his sickle. In nature's abundance, seeds that are planted well and cared for will produce many more seeds. Likewise, the seeds of faith. Jesus is asking all of us every day to do our part in sowing seeds of faith in our world, promising that God will take our small efforts and do great things with them. The gift of faith is meant to be shared. The faith we live is designed to spring forth from us and produce faith, hope, and joy in others. The money raised by the Bishop's Annual Appeal goes towards ministries that are sowing the seeds of faith and love in the Diocese of Saskatoon. As you consider your gift this year, I invite you to consider who has planted the seeds of faith in your life. Your faith was nurtured because someone cared enough to teach you about God. You worship because someone brought or invited you to church. You serve those in need because you have been served and cared for by others.
L'Arche is a dynamic community where every human being is celebrated and valued, recognizing that each person has the ability to love, transcends all division, and brings us into greater communion with one another. I have chosen to live my faith out serving L'Arche because I see it as a family that takes earthly values and twists them around to a place where the weakest become the greatest, where the fact that one is becomes more important than what one has. The funding from the Bishop's Annual Appeal allows our community to reach out in solidarity by connecting to other large communities in Canada and around the world. This year, we also received funding from the Education of the Laity Fund to send 3 community members to the Faith and Light Gathering in Winnipeg.
God cares what we do with the gifts we have been given, where we plant the seeds that have been given us to sow. Sharing faith is not always easy. We can hoard our seeds, or out of fear we can be tempted to toss them into safe places in the corners of our own lives, or we can become distracted and forget about all those in need of God's seeds of faith. The Bishop's Annual Appeal is one way that you can offer God's blessings back to the Church and know that your seeds are being planted with great care. Some of those seeds build up the members of our faith community through education and parish-based ministries. Other seeds are planted outside of our parish doors to reach out in love to God's people in the world.
I was hesitant to go to lay formation because my husband and I are at different places in our faith journey, and I was afraid this would create an even greater difference. But I finally went, and I discovered that our faith journey is like our golf games. We play the same course, we go the same direction, but we don't get to the hole at the same time or with the same number of strokes. Everyone is at a different place in their journey. I'm so grateful that the Bishop's Annual Appeal provided for a program that gave me the opportunity to get away from my normal life, to learn, ponder, pray, and be still long enough to recognize God's presence around me and in others. Lay formation was never intended to train me for ministry, but it opened my heart to where God was asking me to serve Him. This year, my husband Doug and I have provided leadership for the Rock the Mount Youth Rally at Mount Carmel, just outside of Humboldt. The seeds of faith that were nurtured and planted in me at lay formation are growing in unexpected ways, and I am providing an opportunity for new seeds of faith to be planted in the young people of our diocese. in part because of an experience offered to me by the Bishop's annual appeal.
One of the most life-giving parts of priestly ministry is working alongside lay people, watching them raise families and serve God in their homes, communities, and workplaces. Many people in our parishes don't feel equipped to offer ministry, and I need their help so we can all love and serve the world together. In addition to forming seminarians, the Bishop's Annual Appeal provides funding and programs that support education and formation for our lay people.
The Bishop's Annual Appeal is a way to extend the reach and breadth of the blessing that God has given you. You might not be called to have a conversation with someone in prison this year. You may live too far away to serve lunch at the Friendship Inn as a volunteer. Your parish might not have anyone going through RCIA at this time. And yet, we are called as church to go to the prison, to feed the hungry, and to journey with candidates and catechumens who will join our church at the Easter Vigil. The ministry funded by the Annual Appeal collects our seeds, sows them carefully in anticipation of a rich harvest of faith.
We learn faith in many different ways. For me, learning faith was a reflection of the gifts that I've been given from my friends and my family. My grandmother fed the people in her community when they needed it most and was a friend to all. Throughout my faith life, I have learned that we sow the seeds of faith in many different ways. Every day at the Friendship Inn, we sow seeds of faith by feeding hungry people when they are most in need. We have the chance to listen to the stories of God's people, to share life and friendship, and to eat together. Your gift to the Bishop's Annual Appeal is God's gift of food to the hungry and friendship to the lonely.
Events like our annual Bishop's Cup basketball game to the Momentum Youth Rally. We are working hard to reach out and support Catholic youth, and yet there is so much that remains to be done. With more resources, we could provide more funding to train youth ministers for parishes, we could gather youth from across the diocese more often, and we could support more young people in their own ministry, to their peers and to the community. Young people are the future of our faith, and the Bishop's Annual Appeal needs your support to increase our capacity to reach out to them, to draw them in, and to use their gifts to build up our church.
Wow, and I look at the children that are taking the sacraments and say, you know, you are future leaders in this church, and their enthusiasm at this time, you want to increase that enthusiasm and work towards that so that they stay with the church, they stay with their faith.
I grew up on this farm not far from Elrose, and I was raised coming to Immaculate Heart of Mary Parish. I was born just a few years before the very first Bishop's Annual Appeal. As a kid, I couldn't have told you very much about the Bishop's Annual Appeal, except that every fall my dad was a volunteer after the harvest was finished. Now, I work for the Diocese of Saskatoon, overseeing many of the ministries and staff that are funded by the Appeal. And looking back, I can see how the ministries made possible by the Appeal were a key part of my faith life. My catechism teachers received support and programs from the diocese. I went to a youth retreat in the neighboring town of Eston that was put on by the Diocesan Youth Retreat Team. It was one of the only Catholic youth events I was able to attend as a young person. When I was 12, I was so excited that we received Father Real Bussiere as our priest just a year after his ordination. His education was paid for by the Bishop's Annual Appeal, and he was the first priest I met who was closer in age to me than to my grandparents. He made faith seem like a real possibility for young people. My faith life was nurtured and deepened by the Bishop's Annual Appeal, and I had no idea at the time. As a young adult, I lived in 3 other Canadian dioceses and traveled to many others before coming back to work and live in Saskatoon. For most of my life, I took for granted just how much the Diocese of Saskatoon does to plant seeds of faith. As a parent of young children, I now know that it will take a community to raise my children with faith. When we had our first baby at Royal University Hospital, the Bishop's Annual Appeal allowed for the Spiritual Care Department to come and provide a visit. It was the first blessing for Mark and I and our new baby as we began our life as a family. I'm grateful that the ministries funded by the Bishop's Annual Appeal mean that many more people than just me will be sowing seeds of faith in my children. Someday, I hope they also will be able to see how blessed they've been to have been raised in a community that spans from Richmond to Rose Valley. And every day, I consider it one of the greatest privileges of my life that I've been asked to work in ministry in the very diocese that offered me baptism.
God is faithful. Thanks to the grace of God, your generosity, and much effort from many people, even amidst the challenges of our day, our diocese continues to grow. God promises us that when we sow His seeds, the fruit will exceed what we are able to harvest. The present ministry needs in our diocese do, in fact, exceed what we have been given faithfully, bringing in through the Bishop's Annual Appeal over the past number of years. We have more refugees than ever who are trying to make a home in our province. More Catholics are in hospital each year than our present chaplaincy teams are able to visit. We have had to cut funding in some of our Catholic ministry partners and don't pay our employees very well. Other programs we'd like to offer are waiting in the wings. We continue to need your help to provide the funds that will allow us to continue to be God's faithful sowers for many more years to come. Thank you for your faith and for your generosity. Together, let's sow seeds of faith and do our part in God bringing forth a bountiful harvest of 30, 60, and 100-fold.